Welcome to the Cleric Corner, where we talk about all things Dungeons and Dragons, tapping into our higher powers to create worlds that are more unique and stories that are more impactful. Last time we talked about how our players reached the basalt pools on the Island of Sool, where they will be fishing for the giant fish for the trade ship that they ported with, where they had to trek through the migration of giant crabs, talk their way through pools of mud mephits, and out-trek a hungry jaguar. This time I'll be covering the last 2 sessions of the campaign, as I want to do the campaign diaries every other week, and then every week that video doesn't come out will be a general tips and tricks video for dungeon masters and players on how to create a more unique and more impactful world. As always, I will be catching you up on what I had originally planned for these characters and these sessions, but then what ended up happening due to the agency and choice of the players. And then find those takeaways that we can learn from, improve from, and do better next time. So make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that little notification bell so you always know when there's a new upload. That way we can beat the YouTube algorithm and continue to spread the good word of Dungeons and Dragons. Now a little historical context for the island that they're on. 50 years ago, on this small turtle island, there was something called Fey Day. On Fey Day, a portal to the Feywild opened up on the side of the island that they're on currently, of the basalt pools. This unleashed a horde of giantkin and ogrekin ready to claim the new land as their own. This was done with the help of a hag, although unbeknownst to all of the Tortles at the time. The Tortles fought back valiantly, more specifically one Tortle named Merrick, who made his way up to the Fey portal, burned it, and was never heard from again. That gave the Tortles just enough edge to overcome the ogre horde and then put up a monument in Merrick's honor. Throughout the years, rumors did pop up about the hag, although infrequent, as some Tortles eventually came upon her hut and agreed to offers that they couldn't refuse. Knowing all of this, I planned a few different trails for the party to follow. However, not putting expectations on what would happen when they found her. They could kill her or they could make deals with her. I don't know. I planned for both. But this hag was going to be the first official arc of the campaign. So the session opened up with them rowing out to the middle of the lake of the basalt pools and starting to fish, using the fishing table that I had created, and I'll actually put up here so you guys can see it. On that table, apart from the fish that they fished, they were able to get a couple magic items, but eventually fished out some giant-sized clothing. This gave me an opportunity to use a Tortle NPC that was in the boat with them to tell them the story of Fey Day, or at least how this Tortle remembered it. So hook number 1 was this Tortle telling them the actual location of this supposed Fey portal that Merrick had burned. And I expected the players to go sightseeing a little bit, as I had told them originally that their boat did not plan to leave shore again for the next 5 days. However, they brushed this idea off as soon as they heard it. Apparently they weren't too interested in that. However, I did implement hook number 2, which was the backstory of the player character Tortle, the Tortle Druid, that in his backstory he originally gave to me, he introduced a mysterious man. A man who would just show up when he started fishing and would always catch bigger fish. And he would never be able to get close enough to see who it actually was, but this man was somehow always there. This, of course, on my end, was the actual hag who was fulfilling a promise she had made to a different Tortle fisherman. So if Tokoko, the Tortle, wants to become the best fisherman there is, he may need to figure out what's going on here first. And I should clarify, he definitely does want to be the best fisherman there is. Now, one of the players did exactly what I wanted to happen and actually suggested, hey, let's go follow this mysterious man and see what he's up to and see what he's all about. But for some reason, that was also brushed off by the party. They were having too much fun fishing, I guess. Instead, the first chaotic thing of the night happened when our Warforged decided to figure out the depth of the lake, which I had previously surmised that it was 300 feet down, and how they went about it was they tied a rope to the 300-pound rock Warforged to jump in, while the other end was tied to not the strongest character of the group, but the rogue. And so, jumping off into the water, almost pulling the rogue with him, he plummeted 300 feet down, taking enough fall damage with his weight to go unconscious at the bottom of the lake, leaving our only other 2 player characters with underwater breathing to go rescue him, only to find him slowly being wrapped up in these gigantic tentacles of a giant octopus. Now, miraculously, with 2 natural 20 death saving throws from both the warlock and the monk, they were able to defeat the giant octopus and drag the Warforged back up onto the beach. Got to love consequences to your actions. After the fishing was complete and the Tortles started to make their way back to the original town, the players did decide to visit the monument to Merrick and handed off their big wagon of crab meat that I mentioned in the last video to the other Tortles to take back. Unfortunately, the cart did not make it back, as the hungry jaguar was still trailing them. When they got to the other village, closer to the monument to Merrick, I implemented the 3rd hook. And I planned a thread in this session for a job board posting of eggs that were stolen by these devil monkeys. They took the job since it offered money, then quickly visited the bar, grabbed a night's sleep, and then headed off in the morning. The next morning, they did find a gigantic cave full of giant bats and a couple of measles from the book Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, which were the supposed devil monkeys. They were escapees from the hag who was experimenting on them and had a few stolen hag-like things, including a dead crow in a cage and a jar with an eyeball in it. Now, I want to touch on one thing real quick, a DM tool that I try to implement as much as I can, and it's called RETROACTIVE PREP. There's a lot of loose ends and improvisational things that happen at each session. Because it's the nature of the game, I try to tie loose ends back into the story to further focus on the point of the adventure. For example, in the very first session, one of our player characters introduced us to Mike, the tinkerer shop owner that was a little bit grumpy. Now, after the session, I did some retroactive prep, knowing the things that I knew about the island and knowing that Feywild had introduced a lot of orcs and giantkin. Mike just happened to be an Etin, which is a giantkin who can disguise himself as a human, just trying to make his way in his new home. Now, if the players went deeper into the cave that they were in, hook number 4 would have been seeing Mike having a brunch or doing something with his hill giant friend at the end of the tunnel. However, they got scared the moment they walked into a room full of bat guano and not enough dark vision to see the roof of the cave, so they turned tail and ran right out back to the village that they came from. After they delivered the eggs, I did again some retroactive prep and implemented hook number 5. Now, I have to mention that the only reason I did this many hooks for one adventure, which I don't normally do, the reason being is that it did include a player's backstory, being the mysterious man. And I didn't at that time really see a reason why they would come back to the island. That said, the eyeball that they happened to pick up in the cave with the measles just so happened to be the eyeball of Box, the bartender that they had met the previous night. Luckily, I had improv'd him having an eye patch and with a slight love interest with the girl that they bought their room at the inn from. So in this session, I implemented that relation as well as a journal that was also stolen by the measles of Lonnie, the innkeeper. Inside this journal, it laid out the love story of Box and Lonnie over the course of the last 40 years, where they were actually set to be engaged, but then one day out of nowhere, the writing changed and addressed him only as a friend. This was the same day that Box gained the eye patch. To the player's credit, they actually confronted Box about this, and with the few good rolls, Box admitted that he had went to the hag and made a deal to keep Lonnie safe while they were both adventuring on the high seas. Unfortunately, the hag took keep an eye on her very literally, and unfortunately, Box lost a lot more than what he bargained for. Now, one player got fired up that they could help these two couples finally come together again, breaking whatever curse that was in their relationship from this hag. But to my despair, the other players were like, no, we can't go, we're gonna miss our boat that they still had 2 days to get on. But I can't mess with player agency, and they decided that the risk was too great because who knows what could happen. So I guess you win some, you lose some. However, it's definitely given me insight on the motivations of my players, and it is not doing a good deed. But a lesson for all Dungeon Masters, that player motivation is super, super important. And when players just aren't biting, it's time to move on to things that they may be more into. But hey, we might still see in the future what kind of consequences not confronting the hag might bring. So, on to other things. As they traveled back into the original port town that they had first docked, a magical hurricane hit the island very suddenly, dismantling houses and damaging the trade ship that they came in on. Guess they had a couple more days after all. But after putting up makeshift shelters and making sure all of the residents of the town were okay, they slept in for the night. Waking up in the morning only to see a ship coming towards them displaying a pirate flag. So tune in next time for the campaign diary to see some options that we may give the players to leave the island. And if you've had your own experience with players totally disregarding your hooks, or have done a little retroactive prep in your own games, comment below. In the meantime, go out there and spread the good word of D&D so that we can create a better world both on and off our tables. See you in the next one.